stress chart, what you saw is we had, Robin is the grandmother and the grandfather who are raising Onaje since the death of his father at age 4. He's now 14. AJ, ironically, has the most stress at 90%. The biological mother, Juanita, has just kind of recently come into the picture, and she doesn't have as much stress as the rest of the family. We did a circular question, which was key, where you'll see that this was a game changer, bringing in the dad who has passed away into the session. And as you see, everybody brought out their top 3 stressors. Robin and Michael had a very similar group of stressors or problems they wanted to solve with AJ, which is around trust, disrespect, and school performance and lying. We have Juanita agreeing with the grandmother, and AJ really also agreeing with what was said with the adults. And then we got into the big elephant in the room kind of thing, where we have pornography and sexting and technology problems. And the grandmother said this really was a step forward. And so just briefly, what we're doing today is we're going to be taking those stressors and making the transition question with the family is, would you like to know what's causing this stress? And we're going to move into the toxic seeds and the undercurrents that are driving the symptoms, which the family calls stressors and mental health professionals often call symptoms. They're one and the same. So just to give a brief description of the case, AJ is 14 years old, African-American male. At age 4, the trauma was huge, where AJ's father was shot and killed by a Caucasian police officer. The mother, Juanita, became so overwhelmed at this point that she gave up her parental rights to the paternal grandmother, which is another trauma for a 4-year-old. And then AJ has been with this family for 2 years, and the family has done great work with him. There's been a lot of stabilization, where when Onaje first worked with AJ, there was suicidality, aggression, running away, extreme disrespect. And so the big thing that Onaje asked me to come in as a consultant was that we had not been able to get to AJ's father's death, and that is really a driver of some of these symptoms here around grief, pornography, and peer relationships. So that was the reason for getting together with Onaje. And so let's just talk about this first step for just a second. And this transition sentence is, now that we know what the stressors are, let's find out what's causing the stress. And to do this, I'm going to draw an apple tree, and together we're going to find out why these stressors are happening. Introduce this to the family, and then I'll pause the tape and we'll have a discussion on this with myself and Onaje and you guys. So let's go to the tape. I took these issues from your stress chart and I put them on the apples of the tree. So if I was a plant doctor looking at an apple tree, I would look at the fruit to see how stressed out the tree was. I could see, if I was coming to your house, Robin and Michael, I could see sometimes a lack of truthfulness. I could see poor choices. I could see disrespect. I could see all these things with my eyes. If I went to a doctor, the doctor would say, these are symptoms. Do you have a sore throat? Do you have a fever? What is your skin color? And a doctor is going to do blood work to say what's causing these symptoms. Is it bacterial? Is it a virus? Do you need a Z-Pack? Do you need to go for more tests? So in our world, my world, it's the stressors that are also the symptoms or the weeds. So what I want to do today is get at what are the seeds that are causing the stress or symptoms. So in other words, the undercurrents are the drivers that we're going to talk about. And I sent you this sheet, I think 2 weeks ago, or whenever we met. And I want to just ask each of you to guess at what are the top 2 seeds that are producing toxins. Because if I know what the seeds are, then I know what to advise as a coach. What are the root causes of the problems? And there's 4 main ones in all families: misuse of power, unhealed wounds, mental or physical impairment, or unmet primal needs. So Onaje, if you could unmute your phone, how, based on this question, share your thoughts for AJ and the family in terms of, how it can be helpful to them and also for yourself going forward, future cases.
Well, I would say that the family, Juanita had she might have been in the call maybe for a month, maybe 6 weeks the most, and not a framework within the possibility of the things which are causing the bad apples allows them to say, oh, okay, I can see where they stand. And if I hadn't brought those things up, it was just a new way of seeing for them. So for me as a therapist, it was very helpful because it created the framework that I could then work from.
Where it's like, these problems aren't just floating in outer space. There's going to be, a connection to the problem at the surface or the weeds that you see. And we're going to start to move you guys to be co-detectives for us to find out what's causing these apples metaphorically, i.e. the stressors on your chart. So what I hear you saying is that helps the family normalize the stress and symptoms into a more linear way of thinking, and also to think of it more as a systemic problem versus an individual problem. I don't know if I'm close or way off.
No, indeed, you're on it. It gives them context, right? It helps them to create the context of how these seemingly maybe unrelated things are in fact all related, because all of them are part of the composite that's creating the problem. So yes, it does give them a context. Yes.
Another challenge I had when I began trauma treatment was I was told by many people it had to be very long-term and sometimes arduous. And then, I read about the terminology brief, strategic, time and energy trying at guesswork. We're trying to find the light switch in the dark. And so for me, this technique has helped me as a tool to get to where the problem is, or abstract. And so they appreciated, going to what they can relate to, which is a clear before, during, and after. So the second one I wanted to come on briefly for me, throughout my career, I hung out a lot on the apples. I didn't call them apples at the time, but I did a lot of work, or was taught a lot of work, mostly individual treatment, to work with the symptom, which could go to behavioral interventions, psychotropic medication, anything I could do to slow down the problems. I remember one moment of clarity. I'll tell you a quick story where in my process to do a good job of first order change, sometimes I never got to second order change, which means change that occurs at a root level. And so that when you leave treatment with them, they begin the new undercurrents that are healthy, and they're becoming the new normal. So for example, you might work with a family that does not have the ability at the time to be nurturing to their child, and that's causing trauma, but the techniques you give them become their own, and you no longer are needed. But for example, I was working with a couple, and I only saw the individual wife. And I got a call from the husband one day and said, boy, Scott, I'm so glad that you're working with my wife, because now I don't have to really deal or talk with her or work out really any issues. She can just complain to you instead of complain to me. And so I knew right then, triangulation equals strangulation. So in other words, I was being triangulated into the system to keep the system at a first order change level and not work with the entire family, in this case, the couple, to move into second order change. So for me, this has been a on-ramp to move from first order change to second order change. Not only does it give me a pathway to look at the seeds, but it gives the clients the same thing. So that for me was really important.